Well, hi, everybody. I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is a very special moment for Top of Mind, being able to help you all with these kind of new skills that we all have to develop really quickly. I'm Paola Yuspa-Abbott, president and founder of Top of Mind PR. Our public relations company focuses on traditional media, social media, digital marketing. But since the start of the coronavirus crisis, we all have turned to virtual meetings to communicate with clients, coworkers, supervisors, vendors, and so forth. So for that reason, we want to share with you some tips on best practices for video meetings and webinars. Remember, impressions matter. Just because we are working from home doesn't mean we should not be professional on video calls and make the best impression on our clients, colleagues, supervisors, vendors. Video calls are an important tool to stay top of mind with your core audience. We hope our webinar will help you fine-tune your video meeting skills and get confident planning video calls, hosting webinars, and so forth. I want to introduce you to my colleague, Courtney Moverly. She is a genius when it comes to technology, as many of you know already. So just gonna go ahead and Courtney, if you want to join us, let me give you the floor.
Hi, Paola. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm so excited to be here with you all today to talk about some of the best practices for webinars and video meetings. So some of the topics that we're going to cover today include video etiquette, audio etiquette, an overview of some of the platforms that are available for you to host your meetings, a brief overview of security, and more. If at any time you have any questions, feel free to utilize the Q&A feature or just write in the chat box and let us know. At the end of the conversation, we'll go through and answer all of the questions that we've received, including those that we got beforehand. So I guess that we can go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with video etiquette. So it's really important that even over a webinar or a video meeting, that you're really giving your best foot forward. So you want to have a nice presentation. It's important to prepare the same way that you would prepare for a meeting that's in person. You want to fix your hair. For ladies, that might mean putting on some makeup and having on, nice clothes. You don't want to just be in your pajamas or something like that. You want to be mindful of your company culture. So dress the same way that you would for your colleagues or clients if you were in the office or going out on meetings. A good solution that Zoom actually has built into the platform is a touch-up feature. So you can actually go into your settings and preferences under video and enable touch-ups, and that'll just go ahead and give you like a soft, silky finish, maybe if you don't have time to get yourself together that day. There's also another great feature on Zoom called virtual background. So what that enables you to do is download any image off the internet that's the correct size, of course, for the background. And you can go ahead and go into settings and enable it in the same place as touch-up. There's a number of backgrounds that you can use. And I know with all of us being at home, we don't always have access to the best location to have a meeting or webinar. So it's a great quick fix if there isn't some place for you to go. One thing to note though is with the virtual backgrounds that not all processing systems support it. So you may need to invest in a green screen or some kind of flat color background in order for it to work. Another good tip to keep in mind is your body language. So you don't want to have your laptop down low where you're having to look down at everybody who you're speaking to. Something that you can do to solve that problem if you don't have a raised up surface to leave your laptop on is to prop it up with books or anything you may have around the house, just so that you have that correct angle and you can make eye contact with the camera. Another good solution that I've seen is using corks to just prop up the back end of the computer if you do just want a slight angle on it. It's also important to note, not everyone uses the webcam that's built in with their computer. And if that's the case for you as well, you want to make sure that you're setting up that external webcam on a sturdy surface. You don't want your video to be wobbling, maybe even falling off. So try to make sure that it's eye level and that it's on a solid surface. It's also super important to keep in mind your posture. So when we're looking at a computer screen, a lot of times if we're at work, we're hunched over, we're leaning back. Just the same way, like I said, you would be in a meeting, you want to be sitting up straight and trying to interact the same way that you would in person. The next tip that I have for you is your lighting. So you want to make sure that you're facing the source of your lighting. Natural light is always preferable, but obviously we don't all have access to natural light. Maybe your best background isn't right in front of a window. So any kind of bright light that you can have in front of your screen is always a good alternative. Another tip in terms of appearance is toggling your camera on and off if you do have to get up and leave and come right back. Just so that, you know, you can do that without everyone seeing what you're doing. So you can do that in the web platform that you're using. And there's also a really great feature where you can do that automatically when you join. So you will not join the meeting with your video enabled, which kind of gives you a second to get your bearings straight, and then enable your video when you're fully ready. So that's it for the video etiquette. So we'll go ahead and move on to audio etiquette. So following on the tail of toggling your camera on and off, we'll go straight into muting yourself or other participants. So to keep background noise to a minimum during a meeting, if you're not the one that's speaking or you're not engaged in an active back-to-back conversation, it's best to keep your audio toggled off just to keep all of the background noise to a minimum. So that kind of just helps any unintended background noise, maybe dogs barking or kids or significant others, anything like that, it keeps it from getting in the way of the meeting. So that's going to be the little microphone button in the bottom corner of your screen. You can just toggle that on and off as needed. There's also another thing that we don't consider often, which is your notifications. So it's important to close all of your browser windows, close all of your applications down, and make sure that your phone is muted, because you don't want to have a bunch of dinging noises coming in or your notifications coming through while your microphone is on. It's also good to test your audio and video before joining a meeting. So specifically speaking about Zoom, you can go to zoom.us/test, and you can fully see how your video and audio will come through during an active meeting. This will also allow you the opportunity to choose which camera you're using and which microphone you're using if you have multiple options. So it's always good to get acquainted with the platform there before hopping into a meeting for the first time. The last point I have for audio etiquette is probably the most prevalent. We've all been in a meeting where you can't hear someone or they can't hear you. So of course, the first thing to test if somebody can't hear you speaking is to check if you are muted. So in the bottom left-hand corner, there's that little microphone button that we were talking about. If you're muted, you'll see a red line through that button. So you want to just go ahead and toggle that back on. If you can't hear anyone, the first thing to do would be to check your volume on your computer, make sure that you're not muted on there. And if you still can't hear them, of course, check with them that they're not muted, and then go ahead and check your audio settings in your actual computer. If you've ever enabled any kind of outside speaker, headphones, specifically Bluetooth headphones, it might still be outputting the audio there. So you're just gonna have to go through your settings and kind of make sure that the audio output is going to the right place. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to technology. So with that, we have which platforms are there available to use. So obviously today we're talking pretty heavily about Zoom because we're on Zoom and that's the platform that we're using. But there are a couple of other options for you. So we'll start with Zoom. If you have Google Chrome or Firefox, you don't even need an app on your computer in order to be able to run a Zoom meeting or webinar. You're going to be able to load up that meeting link and click right down below. It'll say run meeting in browser. You just click that and it'll open up. It's important to note though, if you do run a meeting in a browser, you're not going to have access to all of the bells and whistles that Zoom has to offer. Like what we talked about before, the touch up, the virtual backgrounds, you aren't going to have access to that. If you're running your computer, a Mac, Safari will not allow you to use the browser option, so you will need to download the desktop app, which I would recommend anyways. The same zoom.us, but this time /download will take you to that download page so that you can run it from your desktop directly. A very important thing to note is that if you are running a free version of Zoom for your meetings and you're not paying for the Enterprise Edition or anything like that, you are going to be held to a 40-minute limit for all meetings that are over 2 participants. So you need to keep that in mind when you're planning meetings, to either upgrade your account so that you can host longer meetings, or be cognizant that after 40 meetings, your meeting will be forced to end. There's no option to extend. You'll have to send a new link for a new meeting. The next option that you have is Google Hangouts Meet. So some of you might be familiar with this if you use G Suite for Business, so that your business email comes through Gmail. So the way that this works, it's just like the Hangouts that's available for regular Gmail customers, but it allows meetings of 100 to 250 participants. It works very similar to Zoom. The only difference is going to be that it's hosted directly through Gmail and it is in your browser. And a key thing that both of them have is that if you don't want to be on your laptop or on video, you can dial into a phone number. There's obviously also a lot of other options for video chatting. I know one that's being talked about a lot now is WebEx, that's a little bit more encrypted. We also have Skype, so that's the original video calling service that was actually acquired by Microsoft a couple of years ago. That's going to be something that you can use much the same way as everything else. It's on your laptop, it can be on your phone, but now that can also be used through Amazon Alexa. It has a really cool feature called background blur that you can enable that will just kind of smooth out your background so that you can't discern any features. So the next topic that we're going to touch on is meetings versus webinars. What is the right decision for you? So right now we're obviously in a webinar, and basically what that means is that the host and any designated panelist are going to be the only ones that automatically have audio and video enabled. So everybody else joins as an attendee and is in view only mode. You're going to want to use a meeting for a more collaborative environment. So when you're actually holding a meeting, or you want to be able to interact more one-on-one with your participants. You can host Q&As and things like that in a meeting as well as in a webinar. So you're going to have pretty much the same functionality in terms of tools. The key difference is going to be the audio and visual capabilities. Something important to touch on is the fact that you've seen it a lot in the media lately. They call it Zoom bombing has been going on. So basically, what is Zoom bombing? It's people who are video chat crashers. They get a hold of a link to a meeting and will jump in and will start causing all kinds of chaos. So what are some things that you can do to avoid these disruptions? The most important thing that you can do is manage your participants. So distribute your Zoom meeting link only to the people who are going to be attending. And if you do choose to share that meeting link on social media, you want to make sure that your meeting has a password. So even if anybody gets a hold of the link, only those people who have the password will be able to join. You can also allow only signed in users to join. which again is just another layer of protection for your meeting. You can lock the meeting, you can remove unwanted or disruptive participants, and you can allow removed participants to rejoin. So don't worry if you accidentally kick your client or your colleague out of the meeting, you are always able to bring them back in. You can also control on your end how participants are interacting in a meeting. So you can disable someone's video, you can mute participants if there's unwanted, distracting, or inappropriate noise. You can actually toggle off audio for everyone all at one time by going to manage participants and selecting mute all, or you can just select mute upon entry in your settings, and that means everybody will enter with their audio automatically off. Another couple of things that you can do to keep your meetings safe are turn off file transfer, so that will not allow participants to share documents back and forth. You can turn off annotation, which is the tool that allows people to write on each other's screens during a meeting. And you can also disable private chat, so that will stop individual meeting participants from being able to chat privately outside of the main meeting chat window. So I'm about to wrap up, but I have a couple of extra tips for you before we go. These are just a couple of best practices for whether you're in a meeting or a webinar. You're gonna wanna avoid multitasking. So it's best to leave that PowerPoint presentation you're working on until later. Try to stop replying to emails or answering other texts or phone calls, and give all of your attention to the meeting that you're in the same way that you would do in person. You're going to want to prepare your materials in advance. So if you're sharing content during the meeting, make sure that you have that all prepared ahead of time so that you're ready to share links and documents as people ask for them. Another cool feature that Zoom has that I briefly mentioned earlier is polling. So that's something that you can set up when you're getting the meeting link. What that allows you to do is to create single choice or multiple choice questions where you can gather responses from your attendees. This works in meetings or webinars, and afterwards you'll be able to get a report of how everyone answered. If you do want to have that be anonymous, that's an option in the settings as well. You can have a maximum of 25 polls per scheduled webinar. Another important tip is to monitor the chat function. So if you are in a meeting, a lot of times the chat function is a really good way to keep track of what people are doing. So someone might write there that they can't hear or that you can't hear them. People might ask questions or try to check in with you, just kind of like a sidebar. So it's a good idea to keep an eye on that as you're going. You also probably want to schedule a feedback break. So in a physical room, you can kind of ask if everybody's keeping up with you. You can observe those confused looks, and that's unfortunately not something that you can do if somebody has their visual toggled off. So try to take the Q&A feature into consideration and keep an eye on that as you're going as well. One thing that I know that a lot of us are dealing with right now is internet disruption. So there's obviously a lot more strain on the service providers, on your Wi-Fi. So if your participants are experiencing lagging or skipping, it's good to suggest that they use their computer to access the video and then use their phone to provide their audio. It just kind of splits it up, and then that way, even if the video checks out on the Wi-Fi end, you still are having that participation in the meeting through your phone. And my last tip for you guys is it's always so frustrating if something does lag or skip, or if your computer's running slowly. Usually this happens because your computer's overheating. So just try to keep an eye on it. See if you can hear the fan whirring or you can feel it getting hot. And go ahead and unplug anything that you have plugged into the computer. Try to turn off any external displays that you may have connected, or even close out everything that you're working on. So that kind of works well with the limiting your distractions. Go ahead and shut all those browser windows down. It can sometimes overload your processing system, and it's best to keep it down to just the video call if you can. I think that that's all I have for you guys. Paula, if you're ready.
Yes. Thank you so much for all your tips. Actually, I'm going to implement many of them. Um, I don't know if everybody in my generation, but we are finding Zoom videos a little bit challenging, but I know we're going to get there. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you a question. Then somebody asked us prior to the meeting today. With everyone working remote, there is a lot of action on social media. What are some creative ways to get people engaged to join webinars? Have you seen anything from other companies that stand out?
Oh, that's a really great question, actually. So I think that a best practice with social media just in general is that you want to create really visually engaging content. And that doesn't change when you're promoting a webinar. So you do want to have it be visually engaging so it stands out on the feed and will catch people's attention. You're also going to want to provide equal amounts of valuable information for self-promotion. So people are going to want to attend a webinar that provides something that they're looking to learn or that they want to learn more about. So a couple of ways that I kind of can think of that you would stand out. You can consider running a giveaway. And so that would maybe look like the first 50 participants who join or register for your webinar, they'll be entered into a raffle to win something. So that would encourage people to sign up and register. And then when they receive that, reminder that the webinar is coming up, then they're more likely to click. You can also invite interesting panelists. So people are obviously just going to be more likely to attend if it's something that they want to hear. So having interesting panelists is a really good way to get people excited about an upcoming webinar. And the last thing that I can think of would probably be providing a host of webinars. So you don't want to just provide things that are going to be all self-promotion, like I said, or even just all to a certain industry or something like that. If you're providing a range of other webinars, maybe even like a fitness class or trivia, they're going to have your updates then in their inbox, and they're going to say, oh, they had like a really interesting webinar. This one might be interesting too.
Thank you, Courtney, very much. Yes, the webinar is an amazing way of being top of mind with your clients, but like Courtney said, it's always about adding value to our professional and personal lives. I know we promised this was going to be a 20-minute webinar. I guess we broke our promise. We've been here for 31 minutes. I wonder if anybody else has any additional question. If not, Courtney, I want to thank you so much for all your knowledge preparing for this webinar. And thank you all of you who took the time, your precious time to be here with us. And one thing that I can tell you about Top of Mind, we are trying to figure out any way possible to help you add value to your professional life. Because this is a new reality and we're all learning together because we are all together in this huge mess.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Courtney.
Yeah, no worries. So I just wanted to say, oh, we have a question, I think, coming in the chat function. It says, does Zoom open on browser? Yes, so it will open on your browser if you're using Google Chrome or Fox. If you're using Safari, obviously specifically on Mac, then no, you are not going to be able to open it in the browser. You would have to use the desktop client, which is going to be, you're going to have to go to that zoom.us/download, and then it'll give you the option to download that. Oh, I think we have a couple more questions coming in the Q&A tab. Okay, so I see, for those who aren't very tech savvy, what video platform would you recommend the most? I think that they're all pretty intuitive. And of course, it depends on if you have a G Suite account, if you have a Zoom account. But my biggest suggestion would be to pick one platform and really become an expert in that platform. So pick Zoom. Zoom seems to be the popular choice right now. And just take time to practice, run practice meetings either with your colleagues or your friends, and just get a hang of how it goes. Practice, press all the buttons. There's no shame in pressing all the buttons when you're having a practice session. Just see what they do. And the more that you have these meetings, the more that you'll get comfortable with how it works, whether you're tech savvy or not.
Excellent. So we have a question. I missed the beginning. Is this being recorded? Yes, it is. And we are gonna go ahead and create another e-blast with the recording, a link to it. So you will be able to listen to it 1 time, 10 times, as many times as you need to for some of these things to sink in. How long do you suggest a webinar last, Courtney?
So that's a really good question. We really meant it when we said 20 minutes. So 20 minutes is a good length. It's just enough that you can fit in a good amount of information, but keep people engaged. Anything over that, if you're just talking, you're kind of gonna lose people. So a good way to avoid that is kind of like now how we've broken off into a question and answer period. This is obviously engaging. Like, you guys are able to ask us questions live. We can respond and keep the conversation going. But I would still cap the entire experience at about an hour. Wouldn't you agree, Paula?
I do, absolutely. Somebody's asking, how do you remove Paola from the screen when Courtney is speaking? And I just like looking at myself on the camera. Otherwise, we do know the trick. You just hit the stop video camera.
So when you stop video, especially in a Zoom webinar, sometimes you'll see that their little box will stay and it'll still see their name. So like you would still see Paula's name across the screen. But there is a function. So if you hover over your video screen, once that video is toggled off, there are 3 little buttons in the upper right-hand corner next to mute. I'm clicking on them right now. And there's an option down there just to hide non-video participants. So that'll make it automatic. So if you go to turn off and on your visual again, it'll automatically hide your square again.
Excellent. We have another question. What is your experience with GoToMeeting, especially when it comes to hosting multiple speakers and background options?
So unfortunately, that's not my area of expertise. I don't have a lot of familiarity with GoToMeeting. So I could—
That could be another webinar.
It could be another webinar. But if you'd like to, you can always send us an email to info@topofmind-pr.com. And I would be more than happy to look into it and get back to you.
And another question, very interesting. What are the security concerns that we have heard about with Zoom? And I know you addressed that a little bit, if you could expand.
Yeah, so basically what's been happening kind of in a number of meetings is that you'll get a participant who maybe you didn't necessarily invite or know about, and they'll start, causing disruption. Their video will be disrupting, their audio will be disrupting. And that's why I kind of touched on a couple of things that you can do to mitigate having unwanted visitors in your meeting. So if you take all the security precautions of only sharing the link with the people who you want to have in the meeting, if you do need to share the meeting link widely, only allow people to enter if they have the password. So that's an option when you're setting up the meeting in Zoom in settings. You can click require password. So that'll make them have to know what the password is in order to join. And also just being aware of the audio and visual settings that you have. So something that we touched on as well was that you can manage other people's audio and visual. So toggle them off, turn off their video or their audio, whichever one they're using right away. And then go into manage participants and remove them from the webinar or meeting.
How do we have a headshot show rather than a video?
So that's in your Zoom settings, actually. So, and this would go the same way for if you're doing a Google Hangout meeting. It's just whatever your profile picture is. So you set your profile picture ahead of time. And then when you join, the default screen, if you don't have video on, will just be your headshot rather than just being the plain name across the screen.
When hosting a webinar, is it recommended to make visual presentation along with it? And am I able to add that for everyone to see?
That's actually a really good question. So in my opinion, you want to have a good balance. So you do want to still have your face on the screen because that is what provides the engagement, body language, all of that stuff is important when you're giving a meeting or a webinar online. But it never hurts to have a presentation to go along with it. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. Before the meeting, you can distribute a link to a presentation so they can follow along with you while you're presenting, or you can upload the link in the chat box, or you can actually share your screen. So that's also an option that's available both on Zoom and Hangouts Meet with Google. And you'll just go ahead, it's a big button at the bottom of the screen that says share screen. And it'll allow you, whether you want to just share a specific window, so maybe your window where you have PowerPoint open, or if you want to share your entire screen so that they can follow along with you as you go. But if you are going to do that, I would recommend having your video still enabled. I would not toggle off my video while giving the presentation.
Excellent. How do you create a background that could include your company's logo for your webinar or meeting?
Oh, that's actually a really great question. So what you're going to do is either go into Canva, or if you have access to the Adobe suite, or maybe even just have access to Word. So go ahead and upload your logo, space it out how you want it. Keep in mind what the dimensions are for the virtual background. So you can kind of eyeball it a little bit. Right here, you see what the shape of the screen is. But that's also something that's available online. You just Google Zoom, Hangout, download virtual backgrounds, and it'll bring up the preferred size. And then so you're going to make that in the external program and then just upload it the same way you would do any other kind of virtual background.
So, okay, we have this question. I have a G Suite account. What is Hangouts called for G Suite again?
It's called Hangouts Meet. So it's the same exact thing you'll see in when you log into your Gmail, the same way that you go to your Drive or you go to your contacts, there's a little option that says Meet, and it'll pull you into a separate window, and you'll be able to start a meeting, schedule a meeting the same way that you can with Zoom.
Could you explain the lock the meeting option, please?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways that you can do that. So one way would be, like we talked about, having people register beforehand, only allowing people to come in if they have a password, or only distributing the links to the people who are going to be in the meeting. But you can also lock a Zoom meeting that's already in progress. So what that's going to do is prevent new people from joining, even if they have the meeting ID and password. So nobody else is going to be able to join after that. What you're going to do is click participants. It's at the bottom of the window, and then you click lock meeting in the pop-up window. You'll get a pop-up there, and that'll go ahead and lock down the meeting to avoid anybody else joining in.
How about YouTube Live? Or maybe that is a topic for another webinar.
Yeah, that's kind of the same thing. You can live stream a video and things like that. But again, I think that's a topic for another webinar.
Okay, and what are the best practices when it comes to using polling during webinar? Like if you want to poll those people who are attending the webinar, and then, you know, you have the responses, and then you can actually talk about the results.
Yeah, so it's actually a really great option. What you're going to want to do is create questions that are actually in line with what you're talking about. And you're going to want to create questions that are interesting, or going to have an interesting answer. So There's a variety of different ways that you can do this. But I would also try to not overload on the polling option. So you can ask up to 25 questions, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you should do. It's fun the first couple of times, but it can get tiring going in, answering questions, coming out. So I would just make sure that, like I said, it's aligned with what you're talking about during the actual meeting or webinar.
So I believe we are out of questions. If there is anything else, Courtney, you want to say, I personally want to thank you so much for taking the time and doing this for all of us.
Of course, yeah, no worries. It's been really great being able to share all these tips with you guys. If you have any other questions for us, if there's something that we didn't talk about that you'd like a follow-up for, you can always reach out to us at info@topofmind-pr.com. And somebody on our team will be more than happy to answer your questions. And like I said, if it's something that maybe we're not necessarily acquainted with, we are more than happy to learn. But yeah, so just thank you guys for tuning in.